Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday. We have another edition of the MSP Initiative Live. Circling back with our buddy Ken Patterson and our other buddy Paul Redding, which is two guys along with myself that were on the Channel Strong Tour 2.0 that we did back in late October. How's everyone doing today?
Doing good, thanks. How are you?
It's not quite wintertime yet, but you know, I could use a little bit more heat for a little bit longer. Does that make sense?
Dude, it's already cold down here in Memphis. Like it's been in the 20s this week.
Oh,
Yikes.
Nobody wants that.
No,
not at all. I guess Ken, you're kind of in my boat from a weather standpoint. I think we're gonna take a little bit of a wind the road between me and you soon.
Yeah. We had snow already. We had hurricane, tornado warnings, and then it was back up to 70s and then went back down. It's crazy. Typical New England weather.
Yeah, I'm not down for the crazy snow that you get sometimes. So all good. All right, so it's been about a month, right? I feel like a lot's changed since then, but it's been about a month. I'm just thinking back to the tour. Something came to my mind out of nowhere the other day. I don't know why. We had a guy on the tour. I think it was in it was before Cincinnati, probably Columbus. Had a guy on the tour that had the Surface Duo phone. Did you remember that? It was a purple one.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the first, like, I was on the Microsoft phone bandwagon way back, right? Like when Switch Fox was still a thing.
Right.
The keyboard. And they also had the HTC like sliding thing with the keyboard. And then I've been an iPhone ever since. And it was just interesting that this guy had the new Microsoft phone, and I was like, okay, well, let's check it out. It wasn't bad. I would never do the first generation one, but I might keep an eye on it.
I haven't even seen one in person. I don't know how I missed that on the tour.
I don't know. It was purple, and that's how I spotted it. I'm like, who in the hell has this purple phone? Yeah, for sure. So did you catch that, Patterson? That was the stop where we did the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, no, I mean, I of course remember Chick-fil-A, but I did not see the purple phone.
Yeah. So have you looked into the Microsoft Duo phone at all? Like, I'm sure you guys heard about it, right?
Heard about it, didn't really look into it. I'm not a big change my phone every time something comes out type of person. I get a phone, I stick with it, because in the past I got all excited being a technology, someone in technology. And then I realized after, I don't know, however many times, I get all excited, I get it, and it's just another phone, because that's what I use it for. You know what I mean? Like I had the Note where I thought I was going to write all these notes out. I've had all the toys, but at the end of the day, it's a phone. And the excitement gets done. As soon as I buy it, I'm like, what happened? Where was all this excitement? What was I excited for? So yeah, it'd have to be something pretty life altering for me to say, oh, I got to jump my phone and change it again.
Yeah, I jumped over from Android to iPhone right after the exploding notes. You remember those? Like, couldn't carry them on an airplane. So I get my new phone. I'm super excited about it. I'm like you. I'm like, I know I'm going to write all these notes. And I did actually like that phone. And then 2 weeks later, I can't get on a plane with it. You know what I mean? I switched to Apple at that point. And I have not been looking at other devices. I just got the new massive phone. I got the iPhone 12 Max. It's like a tablet in your pocket.
I have the Pro. I just got the 12 Pro, not the Max, because I want to be able to like put it in my front pocket. Number two, I was forced into that phone change. I was not planning to switch phones. We don't necessarily have to go into that story, but yes, I am no longer a Verizon wireless customer, and will never be ever again.
Oh wow!
Yes, they are officially on the George blacklist,
and for good reason.
It's hard to get off that list.
There is a way off that list?
I don't think so. So that was one cool thing I remember from the tour that hit me out of nowhere, because I was in Best Buy the other day and I saw it on the display and I was like, oh, that's right. I remember this guy with the purple phone. I mean, the dual screen phone, right? Although it does remind me of another story where, and it's, we all forgot our phones on the bus at a stop, and then the bus drove away.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't believe us at first. You thought I was messing with you. I walked in.
Well, no. When Clay came in, we didn't believe it. Then you came in behind him and said, "It's true, guys." But remember,
I'm never getting off a bus without my phone again.
Well, you got off the phone without your phone and your food. That's the bigger problem.
Right. That's true. You guys had just gotten your lunch, so at least you got to sit there and eat while we waited on the bus.
We just sat down in booth and started eating. We're like, no big deal.
Okay.
By the time I got on the bus, my food was stone cold. So I was like mad and hungry.
But don't forget, I did say, Paul, why don't you just get another sandwich? It's going to be a while.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think I was too irritated at that point to eat.
And that was the best time I've ever been left behind. I was comfortable, I was warm, and I had food, so I wasn't worried about it.
And you were dry.
Well,
yeah.
The fact that you've been left behind more than once says a lot.
This is true.
The reality that this time you weren't stranded with basically nothing.
Right.
Was an improvement.
Yes. I mean, you couldn't have got any worse unless it started hailing or the ground opened up. I mean, think about it. I was alone. I had no wallet. It started to pour out. I mean, I had nowhere to go.
I mean, at least we stopped eventually.
You only had to walk a mile.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Wow, that's all right. Sade, who's probably on a break outside, she was the one that was stranded on the bus with, like, she started texting and calling people, and like all the phones started buzzing.
I wish I could have seen that as she calls everybody. Each phone rings.
It's totally a reality scene, right? Like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, 100%. I could just, she's being driven off into the sunset.
Yeah. That probably wasn't. We'll try and avoid that next time for sure. So thinking about, and Paul, since we've been through a few of these, some of the same questions come up, but everybody has a different thing. So was there any one conversation with anyone, any MSP that you had on, the 2-week trip that springs out to you, right? Somebody that was maybe doing something different, somebody that was doing well, anything that maybe pops out at you?
Man, I'll be honest with you. I think that let's take it as a collective, as a whole. It's not one conversation. It's the whole mood and trajectory of the channel. When we first went out on the road, I don't think any of us knew what we were going to find out there, right? Like, is anybody going to show up to this thing? Is everybody going to stand 50 feet apart and freak out? What I was impressed with is that everyone we talked to is experiencing some kind of growth. And it wasn't the temporary bang, everybody had to run home, you grew 300 tickets because you moved them over to remote services kind of deal, right? I think that the channel as a whole, everybody I talked to seemed to feel that their customers had a wake-up call here, that people were like, oh God, I need to listen to the IT guy all of a sudden. And I think as a whole, this has springboarded a lot of both development in software, but also like business development for people. We're in the medical sector, and I can tell you right now, telehealth jumped forward 5 years overnight. It's not going back in that box, right? Like, we're not going back to a place where you assume you have to go sit in the waiting room with everybody ever again. And that same change has happened all across the channel. Everybody I talk to, it's like, how have you done this year? I had a weak spot right there when it slowed down, and now I'm seeing, the best Q4 I've seen in my career. So that was really encouraging.
Yeah, we had even small shops, like we talked about on one of the other calls, George, and this, Paul. We were Chicago. The one guy came up and said, Ken, I just want to say, thank God before we did this, we started transitioning to M365, so he was moving to the cloud, moving to more secure. And he's a smaller shop, and he ended up hiring 4 people since this started. So I was blown away that, not that I don't think when my business was that size, I don't think I could have done that separate from a pandemic. During a pandemic, he's hired 4 new people that are not in his office, right? He hired them, did the interview, and then they're working from home right out of the gate as technicians for his company. And he said he's going to hire another one, by the end of that week. So for me, you're right. Seeing that type of stuff happen is very positive. Now, again, that's not saying that this whole entire thing has been rah, 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 we're all winning. But for the most part, we've seen people either stay the same, which is still a very good task when you think about certain areas getting hit harder, or get bigger and grow. And I think that's also attributed to most of those people were forward thinking and already moving to work, not maybe work from home, but cloud, right? And I think that's just a big piece of it. And, for you, Paul, from a compliance standpoint, holy moly, right? There's so many questions. I can't tell you, I'll tell you from being on the bus, I got more, you and I spent a lot of time together, mission briefings, other places, but on the bus tour, I had more people come to me and ask questions that you answered so eloquently about compliance because of what happened in the pandemic, that I learned a lot. Forget about, I know you and I know a lot of this stuff, but man, on the bus tour, by far, I learned so much from you talking to the MSPs who are asking questions like, okay, did things get pulled away from telehealth, for instance? Can we just do that willy-nilly now? And you're like, no. Right. And you go into that conversation and things like that were just really good to watch and witness.
I think it's clear that, listen, the same thing that's kind of happening in the MSP space, right? People merging, people getting rolled up into larger orgs, has been happening in the medical space for a while, right? I mean, especially when all the healthcare laws changed back, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it became harder to make money, right? You had to see more people in less amount of time, which it's kind of what's happening now, just virtually, right? The problem is, as a result, a lot of these individual or smaller practice guys, I mean, I'm sure Paul will triple down on what I'm about to say, were like, HIPAA, I'm too small. They're never going to look at me.
Right.
No problem. Don't waste my time or my money. I got other fish to fry. I'll spend my money over here. And they were, half-assing it's probably the right way to say it, doing it wrong because they thought they were never going to really be in the bullseye. Now working from home, they're cutting even more corners probably, right? They're on their home stuff. I mean, they're like, and we had Paul on earlier, a couple of times earlier this year, when the pandemic first kicked off, and everybody was like, oh, well, yeah, the government like temporarily suspended HIPAA. And Paul's like, whoa, where did you hear that? That's not right. But I mean, the challenge was they were already shoestringing it in some cases. They already thought they weren't in the potential, target zone. And now they're probably even worse off in some cases. I'll go one step further until Paul starts his soapbox. But the other thing I learned from the trip from Paul, specifically about HIPAA and medical, is that when you get a HIPAA, the certified, you basically get a certified package in the mail or a letter saying that you're getting audited. Nobody shows up at your door. And I didn't even think about that, right? I'm thinking, oh, there's an audit. Like somebody's coming to show up. They got like a, little badge. Hey, show me all your stuff. No, like you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, you need to reply within X days. Good luck. So Paul, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. And maybe for the people that are watching this, explain what happens when you get that letter in the mail. I don't think people realize what the audit process is.
That's sadly, that's why 94% of people fail their audits. Like it's a way over 9 out of 10 folks are going to fail an audit every time it happens. The reason is because I think in our heads, we have this idea, like you said, somebody's going to show up and you get to talk to them. So you're going to get to say things like, look, I'm a small shop. I got like 3 employees. There's no explanation. There's no conversation between you and the auditor. To your point, he doesn't have a clipboard and a little pencil and walk around like poking through stuff. If the guy's already digging through your office, you're done. Like your credit card better be sitting right next to everything else on the desk. You know what I mean?
Will they accept credit card?
I doubt it. I don't know. Maybe your house does, right? Maybe the deed to your house. No, what happens is, first of all, an audit happens because there's an incident. If there's an incident of any kind, and that doesn't have to be a breach, although yes, obviously ransomware, any of those is going to be an incident. But say a patient gets mad at you, and when they leave, they call and say, I saw this doctor throw away my medical record in the trash. They're not shredding medical records up there. Somebody has to do an investigation. An investigation, to your point, is usually a quick touch. Hey, this has been reported. documentation immediately around what's been said right here, and they evaluate that incident. If it's either a big enough incident to warrant an actual audit, or your immediate response is not spot on perfect, we move into audit land. And to your point, you're going to get a certified letter. You're going to have 10 days to have it right back to them. And all they're going to ask for is your documentation, your risk assessments, your proof of training, your policies and procedures specifically relating to and around the incident, your breach notification policies, all that goes in place. So it's actually really simple. If you hand that in, even though the breach happened, if you were doing what was right in the first place, you're not going to be fine. But the problem is that you don't get to say, look, flip to page 14 right there. See how I drew the red circle around it right there? That's why I didn't encrypt my machines. Or that's why, right? There's none of that, man. A lawyer wrote the law, or lawyers wrote the law, and it's going to be audited and reviewed by other lawyers who will decide how much you're going to pay.
So,
George, really,
yeah, go ahead.
I always like to point out, because
I was waiting for it.
I don't know why Paul doesn't point it out. I think he waits.
You're going to.
It's the coolest thing ever, though. So you just mentioned, I mean, think about that. 94% failure rate of audits. So you imagine that means everybody's failing. But Paul, you guys have a record of having 100% of your people not fail an audit that are your clients. Correct?
That's correct. The seal of compliance that we issue at the end of our process says that we validated and verified everything that you've done under HIPAA. For example, PAX 8 carries that seal of compliance, right? And that means that if PAX 8 gets audited under HIPAA, we're going to produce all that documentation and everything for them. And that's the reason, no matter what happens, you're not going to fail that audit. We've never had somebody get that seal fail, because we don't just give it to you because you hand us a check, right? Like, there's a process you've got to go through, and we're going to do it for you and make sure that you do it right. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do. You just got to do all of it.
Well, it's not the hardest thing in the world to work on your business instead of in your business, but
yeah.
You know, the other thing that I think people, so back to the, hey, the doctor's already shoestringing it. Hey, the doctor's really, you know, in a home, not anything's really done right. Oh, by the way, you can get audited really easily, right? Somebody can just create a complaint anonymously, right? And that's enough to start something. But like, I think part of the other problem is people think, oh, I did it already. What do you mean you did it already? Oh yeah, I did that HIPAA stuff already. I was like, but it's not like a one-time thing. Like, you're supposed to do it every year at least, right? And I think that's the other misperception, right? It's like, oh, I passed my test, I'm good, I never have to go back to high school again. It's not that way. And I think people, that's like, you know, that's the broken knowledge part of this whole thing.
Yeah, you have to have a culture of compliance. Compliance is like a marathon with no finish line. The way you lose is to stop running. As long as you can show that you're out there, you're running, you're doing the right thing, you're okay. But you're right. People think, it's one of the biggest problems that people have is you online, you like download a templated policy that means nothing to your business, doesn't in any way reflect what you do. You have your IT guy throw a firewall in the corner, maybe put out some antivirus. You got HIPAA compliant, right? It's a series of audits. It's training your people. And you know, when I say that culture of compliance as a whole, whether it's HIPAA, CMMC, any form of regulatory compliance, affects everyone inside your organization. It is a organizational wide problem that has to be dealt with. And that's the other place where people really fall on their face is in small business. You go, well, I mean, look, I filled out that survey. The IT guys got their side. We're good. It's not an IT problem. It's a business problem.
I love the other part where, and this going back to, I don't know if shadow IT is the right thing. Maybe it's just straight up cheapness. But like the people who are bringing like the residential stuff to the table, right? The doctor's like, oh yeah, I signed up for iBackup. Don't worry, I'm on my Mac. I signed up for the Apple backup. We're good, $9.99 a month. And I'm just like, dude. I was like, did you ask Apple for their BAA? They're like, oh. I'm like, yeah. I was like, Paul, this happens all the time though, right? Like if you can't get a BAA, technically you're not using it, right?
No, that's correct. Yeah, if it can touch your EPHI conceivably, the law literally uses the word conceivably, right? So if you can maybe run into EPHI through that system, you got to have a business associate agreement on file. And by the way, you also have to set the products up correctly. Ken, I think you'll vouch for this. Microsoft 365, M365 is a fabulous solution built to help you achieve HIPAA compliance or any kind of regulatory compliance. But out of the box, it's not set up that way. It takes professionals, it takes know-how, and it takes you going in and following best practices and doing this stuff right. Or if you read the fine print in the business associate agreement with Microsoft, you're not covered. You have to do it right yourself. That's one of the bigger things too, is these guys that go, I moved to the cloud, I'm compliant. I don't need an MSP. I don't need IT now. I've got an EHR out here in a 365 mailbox. Man, that's not going to cut it.
Well, you also have to point to Article 6B of Microsoft's agreement that states specifically, we are not backing up your data. So then also not backing it up either. So you still have to go out and get a drop suite, someone that's going to back that up and give you a BAA to say that it's backed up as well. So there's so many different things that if you're not paying attention, and the info's out there, right? We've all talked about this ad nauseum. So the info's out there. I think to George's point, a lot of people are working in their business and not on their business. It's a cliche, but it's also true, 100%. So I think that's a big thing to talk about too, is, you gotta start thinking about your business, how it's going to operate and how you're going to protect it before you even go out and protect other people's businesses.
I think that's one of the things in that, on the tour that I really learned is from the MSP community that, like I said, I don't call it a wake up call. No, not everybody got that call, right? Or they may have heard the phone ringing and they didn't answer, but the people out there that actually are looking, it's like, I view it as a business. The MSP that works the help desk tickets, right? That guy that owns that business is struggling, to work in that, like in the business instead of on it. Doctors are the same way, right? So if you go in to talk to, this particular client and it's the doctor who's in the back doing the, patient treatment, his wife is checking you in, his kid is sweeping the floor, maybe they didn't jump ahead and realize, to get their head out of the sand to do this. But the ones that have that practice management structure in place, that knew before the whole pandemic, they had places to go with this business. They're trying to grow it. And this is not a lifestyle. It's a living organism. Those folks saw the writing on the wall fast. I must adopt and adapt to survive. And that's going to continue in 2021. I think that, if telehealth is something that's going to stay, look back to the MSPs I talked to on the road, you realize how many MSPs had no remote employees pre-pandemic and are now saying, I just learned not only can I run an entire remote shop, but I can work nationally because of it. I talked to multiple MSPs that all of a sudden said, hey man, partners of ours that look for leads, right? And they go, I used to be in the Chicago area. Now I'll take anything, anywhere. Because what's happened is before that client might've thought, well, I need my guy to be down the street. Hey man, for almost a year now, nobody's come into your office anyway. It's all gone remote and it's going to stay that way. And I think it's a great opportunity for some of these MSPs to expand into national markets too.
Well, until the Linksys W54G router blows up.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, in the reverse.
Amazing how many of those are still out there, right?
And the reverse of that's happening too. They can actually hire anywhere in the world, right?
Absolutely.
It used to be like places like, our friends in Louisiana, right? There's certain places in Louisiana where you can't find tech help, right? It's a struggle to find good engineers. Well, now you can have help from anywhere. And obviously you still got to do your due diligence when you're screening these people, but you get a good person that's in California that's going to help you in Louisiana, and they can do the job and they can take care of your clients. That's great. It makes things a heck of a lot easier. So there's ways that's going to help as well.
When I was an MSP, that's something that just kind of like a bone to throw out there for guys that are trying to expand and figure out how you cover that multiple time zone thing. We're in Central Time and we had clients in East and we had clients in West. We ended up hiring a couple of remote technicians that work in the Pacific Northwest, specifically because that last couple of hours after my East Coast clients closed, these guys are on regular shift, right? So I think those kind of things, both skill-based hiring, getting just the right person for the job, not because they happen to be the closest, and being able to stack your desk with people that conceivably are in a different time zone and give you more depth without having to run after hours, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So I'll throw this one out there now so I don't forget about it. You know, this is Patterson's favorite question, right? You know, favorite food on the tour. I know you're very particular about your food, Paul, but we had some good food trucks. We had a lot of people like some of the Italian joints. We had a lot of people like certain trucks. Like I got apparently the truck the very, very last day was Red State Barbecue. Apparently it was like one of the best ones on the whole trip, and we didn't even know. But was there any one place, truck, area that you were just like, this was the jam?
From coming out of Memphis, you know, being obviously very picky about barbecue, and you know, I come from a part of the country that has not only good barbecue but a very specific style thereof. So that's something I'm kind of snotty about in general.
I heard
Man,
too much about Kansas City barbecue versus Memphis.
Right. And most of the time I'm disappointed. That last truck in Lexington was absolutely fabulous. And I'll back up a tour before this and say, out of the two, the one that blew my mind was a food truck was Temecula, California. Marietta, man, that's one of the best Texas barbecue I think I've ever had, was in a food truck in California. But you're right, man. We ate really well. We ate really well on this, especially this last trip was great.
It's almost like me getting a cheesesteak out of Philly, right? I'm not number one, I'm not gonna do that. But number two, if I did, I would not be happy with it.
Correct.
Now, whether it's Patterson taking me into some Italian joint with no cell phone signal in Boston, that's a different story.
What place in Boston?
It was Regina.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, nothing fancy, but we roll into the Regina, and he's like, my phone reception went out. I'm like, it's an Italian place. What do you expect, dude?
I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, why do you think when they bring you in here, like, you know, when stuff happens, they can't track you? You're like, you start getting, they're gonna chop me up and start taking me out in sauce cans.
Now, you guys, and talking about neat places that we ran into on the road, you guys, I don't think made it down. Did you make it to the speakeasy in the pizza joint in Indianapolis?
No.
You come down there? That was cool. So we walked down the street in Indianapolis from the hotel that night, and you walk into a pizza delivery place. Like, there's no tables. It's straight up. They do delivery and counter service, right? Everyone acts like they don't see you. They just act like it's totally normal as you walk through their kitchen to this little hole in the wall, and then it's a speakeasy in the back. That was pretty cool. Like, our waiter at dinner that night told us to wander down there, and I think those of us that stayed up.
I would love to be like the teenager on his like first gig, you know, like on a job, just trying to make some money on the side, and having like people roll by, be like, well, wait a minute,
right?
And they just like disappear into the wall. You're like, that doesn't look right.
Yeah, what about the place in Cleveland? That was something we forgot about. George and I forgot, and Joel pointed it out to us. The picky place. It was just all picky food. The bar that had nobody in it but us. Right next.
It was right down the street from the Bass Bar.
Were you in Cleveland? Was Paul there? Yeah, Paul was there.
Yeah.
Looked up and it looked like the Ghostbusters building. Remember?
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I never spent any time in like, you know, the downtown Cleveland spot, you know, area.
Oh, it was nice.
It was better than I expected.
Yeah, and we didn't even get to it, like really stay and enjoy it, right? We just did the bar and hung out there waiting to leave and take off from there. But everything was cool down there. It was nice looking. But not a lot of people were out for obvious reasons, and we had a nice open area to enjoy that. But yeah, that was one of the better places. Joel reminded us of that. We were like, yeah, you know what? That was actually pretty good. It was just picky bar food, but it was good.
Yeah, no, I really feel like we missed out on, like, I didn't realize how much downtown areas in like Cincinnati and Columbus and St. Louis.
Pittsburgh, man. Pittsburgh was, I was just about to say, Pittsburgh was a beautiful city. And that's one, you know, as much as I travel, I bet I haven't been to Pittsburgh since I was like 10 years old or something. You know what I mean? So I really didn't factor into my head that it was going to be such a gorgeous town. And, you know, the leaves were changing, all that. It was beautiful.
You just saw the nice part.
That's fair. Downtown was really pretty too. I walked around.
The closer you get to the stadium, George will tell you it smells, but
you said it, not me. And whatever you do, don't buy a hot dog from the stadium.
No. Oh, that's where the tires go. It was nice. Pittsburgh was nice. I've never got to enjoy it like that. I mean, I went with George at the beginning to go to the game, and we walked to the stadium, and then we got to enjoy it by going to that restaurant around the corner. That was pretty nice, other than the person at the end, but it was a good place.
So one of the things I thought was really cool that I took away was the guy who in Cincinnati, who's an NFL referee. Yeah, like he shows up with his Corvette and his license plate says "Thanks NFL." And I'm like, I was like, "You boys with Roger Goodell or something? What's going on?" I was like, I thought it's hard to get one of those gigs. He's like, "No, I'm a replay official." I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
you got to get it. You got a tough job, pal."
He said, "If you see my face, you're not having a good day." And they have to go up to the booth, because they don't go up there, they do it down on the field. But when something goes wrong, that's when the camera goes up and shows the guy up in the booth.
Shows the guy up there.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about, everybody grows up with a team, right? Like, I guess when you're like, we're like, all right, well, what team do you actually follow? It's like, I don't follow any teams. You're supposed to be impartial, right? I don't know if I could do that. I mean, I guess if the money's right, everybody will do anything, but
if you can get a Corvette that says "Thanks NFL," I'm sure he's pretty happy with his gig.
Yeah, I agree.
And it wasn't just any Corvette. That was the brand new latest edition, the high horsepower, beautiful looking. I mean, it didn't compare to Pete's ride, right?
I was just about to say, was it as nice as the race car following us around?
Well, it was nice looking. Like, I liked the way it looked. It almost looked like a Ferrari, but when he came back from his ride with Pete, because we heard them on the highway. I don't know if you heard them, but he pulled them out on the highway, and you heard him fly by. And Pete, they both get out of the car, and I go, "So, how do you think your vet would do?" He goes, "See how close they are right now?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "That's about as close as I was getting when the race start." He goes, "I wouldn't see him again." I was like, okay. He admitted it right out of the gate and said Pete's car is way faster.
That thing's a rocking on wheels.
Maybe next time. I think Pete wants to go to like a racetrack.
Hey man, there's several. When you do that central U.S., that we call it the Ohio Valley Americana right there. Yeah, man, there's racetracks in every town. We could have done that in Memphis if we come back through here.
Like, it's like, hey, what are you doing tonight? I don't know. Let's go to the racetrack.
Sure.
Right.
All right, I'll grab a case of beer. That'll be interesting to see how that goes. One of the other ones that I thought was pretty cool was like I started on the first trip we were all over the place and I never thought about it. On the second trip I started like taking notes on parking lots that we were setting up in, and I was like, all right, yeah, no, I don't like this type of parking lot. And then like all of a sudden you start becoming a parking lot connoisseur. But hey, if that's where we're living, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Hey, we did have the one stop where the porta potty was dropped off at a separate parking lot from where we were.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it. I mean, it was close enough for us to walk to, but it was raining. And the hotel was right around the corner. Remember, we drove a pretty good couple of blocks before we realized that the hotel was only a walk away from where we needed to go.
Yeah, like literally, you'd go Google Maps, down the street, you come back around, it's like across the way.
Yeah, that's right. Because I went back to the hotel to go to the bathroom. I didn't use the porta potty. It was
that's right.
Yeah.
Cincinnati. That's where that was. Oh,
that was
it was Cleveland. Cleveland. I only remember because I remember the people. Bob Coppage was there, so it was Cleveland.
Right, you're right. That was Cleveland. Because then, no, that was Pittsburgh. Was it Pittsburgh?
No, it was Cleveland. It was Cleveland. I remember because it was.
You're right. It's the day before Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. We had the building. We didn't need a porta potty.
Yeah.
And Cleveland, we had a space, no building. So,
yeah,
it was interesting. But as usual, we pulled it off and it all worked out. But that was interesting. Walking around like okay,
the one in Pittsburgh, like they ran their own data center.
Yeah,
right. That's right.
And they had their race cars, which that was my favorite. The GT. That was beautiful.
That was
nice. That was a beautiful car.
One of the so we had Larry from MSP CFO on Tuesday, and he was saying that the majority of people, like he obviously has a block of people that he's their virtual CFO, right? And obviously has this whole software package and it does all these bells and whistles. But he was saying that the the majority of the people he worked with, didn't really cut a lot of headcount. If anything, they were status quo, or some people added, but nobody really shut down and disappeared off the map, right? And then he was also giving suggestions on, some of the stuff that we talk about, doing at the end of the year. He's like, you should be doing that the whole way through, right? If you're waiting to the end of the year, you're doing yourself a disservice. So when we were on the tour and we were talking to people and we said, hey, what does next year look like? A lot of people were saying that they were looking to expand coming into Q1 and Q2, to be honest with you. Did you guys get the same message?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was, like I said, we ran into the smaller shop in Chicago, and he was expanding, and they were all talking about the same thing, saying, hey, look, even the ones that got hit a little bit, right? We've had a few partners come to us and say, hey, this wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but because of the way we pivot and we adjusted and made changes, we are going to come out of this. So they did point out that it wasn't all like, hey, this was super growth, right? There were some that got hit with that, like George pointed out, the 300 tickets at the beginning of it all, and then that kind of declined. And then they were like, projects were drying up a little bit, but then they came up with some new ideas on education and doing things like that kind of pulled them out in the end. So it's been all over the place, but it sounds like we have a guy like, MSP CFO who deals with a lot of companies and has that same point that we're talking about with everybody else, is most people stayed pretty either flat or grew. And that's a pretty great accomplishment when you think about what happened. There's a lot of companies, outside of our community, restaurants and, places like that have no, they're coming up with options. I got to admit, some of them are pivoting. Like George, and I think Paul, I told you the same thing. We had a Chinese food restaurant that as soon as everything shut down, they were doing mason jars of Mai Tais. So you could pick up, take home and stuff. And then they were the first to open up, they created a movie theater in the back, a drive-in theater. So some of these guys are pivoting.
Well, but you were saying you even mentioned the one MSP that went like hard into marijuana dispensaries and
exactly. Did the dispensary thing, and that's Vegas, right? That's why he was getting killed by the Vegas economy, and then early adopted doing tech support for dispensaries, and it just exploded.
I wonder what that feels and looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it's still technology, right? We talked about this before. It's like, I used to do a lot of work at one of my companies with power plants, and people be like, whoa, it's like, it's still an office. There's an office and there's computers, and you take care of their office. I'm not taking care of the stack with the nuclear meters on it. I'm just taking care of the office. So it's similar. You have an office of people that are dealing with all the accounting, financing, selling, and they have to be supported. Business is very good for that.
I would think twice before I'd walk into a nuclear power plant. I'm not going to lie.
All right, Homer.
You want to talk about some regulatory compliance?
Yeah.
With nuclear data. That's a whole different world.
Yeah, I think The Simpsons does it justice.
The fish with the third eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever if a nuclear power plant went off, I don't think anyone has a chance. Like, they're like, oh, there's a radius. I'm like, there's the wind.
Yeah, we have one that was fairly close to Seabrook, New Hampshire. That was one that was fairly close.
Yeah, that's anytime I hear about that, I'm like, nope, start driving the other direction. I can take a long. What do you think? What do you guys think? Q1, Q2. What are you feeling? You thinking? Yeah, I mean, listen, there's several vaccines. I was just talking to a guy in the UK an hour ago. The UK government's already did their emergency approval. They already have vaccines, on the way, right? Like in the truck, kind of thing. So, who knows how long it's going to take? Who knows how? It sounds great. I'm super thrilled that we're this far along. I'm not a science guy, like biology and chemistry and stuff, but by all accounts, this stuff takes years, right? And they did it quick.
They said normally it's 10 years to find a vaccine for something that's new. That's what's pretty crazy about it, right?
They got it done in 10 months.
Right. Well, it's also scary, and also, two of them are still going strong, right? There was a third that came out and got and completely got decimated because the results were way off and they were just trying to speed the process, but they weren't even there. But we still have, Pfizer and Merck? Is those the two?
Yeah, and what I saw today and over the last couple of days is that, you talk about Q1, Q2, you're going to have to take the shot from either of the ones that comes in. You got to take it a month apart, basically. So I think that we're looking at normalcy in that Q2 world starting to fire back up. No matter what we say here, if it all rolls out tomorrow and people start getting their first rounds of shots, it's February before they get their second and they're really cleared. And that's the first round of people to get it.
It's
So
not going to
sadly, I do
matter.
think it's going to be 6 months into the year before we see.
Yeah, it's not going to matter anyways, because a lot of big companies have made their decisions, which are now the smaller companies are following suit a little bit, right? So the large ones are saying, we're done. 2021's, we're not doing any travel, right? Those are the real big. The kind of like the PAX 8s of the world are saying, well, we don't want to be the first ones jumping in, but we're thinking, June, right? Q3, jumping into Q3, right? That's where I hear the most of everybody saying, we think by Q3, things will start to get back to.
Yeah, but that really doesn't affect the MSP having to go on site. I mean, they've been.
No, not at all.
No.
No, not at all. And one other thing to remember too, that I won't claim this as my own, it was pointed out somewhere else, but remember the flu has a vaccine too, and people die from that. So there's still, everybody's like talking like this vaccine, you're going to inject it and become Superman against COVID. There's still things to think about. So it's great to have a vaccine that hopefully knocks a lot of it out, but we still have to do our due diligence with, it's pretty crazy that it took a pandemic to teach people to wash their hands, I guess is what I'm saying.
Man, I just came back from Disney World, right? So I went and did Disney World and the masks thing with the family. And there are obviously, if anybody can do this right and put thousands of people in a place safely, it's Disney. They are taking every precaution you can imagine. But some of those precautions should have been in place in the first place. Like when you get on a ride now, as you walk up to the stall, at every stall, there's a hand sanitizer. And if you pay attention, like 85% of people that get on the ride use hand sanitizer before they get on the ride. And there's one for everybody when you get off. If we've been doing that in flu season forever, flu season would be much shorter and much less damaging. It's like, for those of us that do fly a whole lot, I don't know that in the middle of flu season, it would have been smarter if I'd have put on a mask in boarding and deboarding last year, because I did get sick last year, right? Some of this stuff is like, I think it woke people up to the idea that we spend a lot of time in very, very close quarters with people that we don't know. And to your point, washing your hands and maybe a splash of the old sanitizer is not the worst thing you ever did.
So what things don't go back, right? You're saying that telemedicine's changed things forever. It's never going to go back to the same way. It'll go back some, but maybe not all the way. You're saying, I still don't see on-sites disappearing. At some point, a box blows up and it's got to be switched out, right? I mean,
right. But I think there's still, everything's going to stay hybrid. I think people, like we talked about before, right? And PAX 8's the same way. Not everybody's going back to the office ever. Some people are going to just be working from home, right? That's going to stay. Of course, there's a lot of people that like to be, need to be working with each other. We talked about that. Engineers love that environment and need it and miss it, but not everybody will. I think that some of that's going to stay the same. Yes, you're still going to go on site. Of course, there's always going to be that need to go on site.
But Patterson, like you're the prime example. What happens when you got that crappy Comcast connection? It keeps on going down. Your internet keeps on going down. Now you're not waiting for school to let out for everybody to get on their PlayStation 5 and like drown the freaking node.
Right, it's already happening. Yeah,
how does
it's
that
happening
work?
all day? Yeah, and I can't even try to fix it because I have to let them finish school, right? And I'm cutting into I'm out of school, Dad, but now I want to play on my game, right? So yeah, they're definitely, bandwidth is super important, but efficient bandwidth is even more important, right? I mean, we had our mission briefing on Tuesday, and Matt Lee, probably our most technical person on the damn call, cut out a whole bunch of times because latency on Cox was having a problem on Tuesday. Yep. And so his head would keep freezing, and it's funny hearing him say, hey, I'm having technical difficulties, right? It's like, what's going on? And, Matt, in typical fashion, at the end comes back on and has a blue screen behind him as his background. So I thought that was perfect. But yeah, it's happening everywhere. Bandwidth is getting sucked up. I mean, I have gigabit, so I shouldn't have any problems on my network. But then I start looking at my latency, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? What's happening? And my kids are upstairs on Wi-Fi getting hardly nothing, trying to just do their work. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely an issue.
like, listen, fiber to the building's great if you can get it.
Right.
Everybody
Right.
else is running on copper lines that have been out for 40 years.
Right.
The line to my house was laying across the street for 4 months. You drove across the internet line that comes to my house, and I'd see a truck would pull up out there. This is all the way during the pandemic, from like April till August. This thing's laying out there, and you'd see the truck roll up. Comcast guy would get out, and you're like, thank God they're going to bury the line. No, too many people would run it over, so they replaced the one running through the middle of the street. Efficiency at its best.
But George, to also state, we talked about this before on the tour with your 3 separate lines of communications to the bus. We did pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is everybody going to have 2 internet providers? Is that realistic?
Am I the only one looking for a second internet provider for their house right now? Like, as we
Yeah,
speak,
I know.
not an
Unfortunately,
alternative, a second.
I'm in a small town and they have to okay the internet, and you know how that goes. It's all about money. So Comcast has been here for 30 years and they will not let Verizon in or anybody else in. So we have just one choice.
Wow. No, yeah, you're talking about like the franchise agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask this then. How realistic, like everybody's phone's saying 5G now. I think that's just
That's not.
They change the label, right? Like how, like if you're not like in downtown New York, which at this point a lot of people are leaving, or LA, they can't leave their house anyway. Like where is 5G for real? I haven't even really seen it.
My phone says I'm on 5G all the time.
Yeah.
It's no faster than it ever was before. I was sitting here staring at an email loading the other day with perfect 5G signal. So
Yeah.
at least here, I don't think it's real.
I know, I agree with you 100%, Paul. It's everywhere. And somebody posted on the internet the other day, 5G my ass, and they showed their phone, and it was hilarious. It was, I don't remember how low it was. It was almost like 10K or something. And he's like, it said 5G up in the corner, and he was downloading, he was showing the speed, and I was just like, yep, that makes sense. I always thought it was my phone. I'm like, is something wrong with my phone? Like, it says 5G. I got all my bars. And just to your point, Paul, I'm like, why is my email not opening up right now?
But there is a problem with your phone because you can't
Shut up.
You can't even use Slack on your phone.
Just because you're on an Apple and I got a real one.
Hey man, my app 2 against 1.
Yeah.
All right, what's going on? Time for an upgrade.
Nope.
Gotta get the tablet in your pocket, baby. Tablet in your pocket.
It's a phone, and that's what it does.
I will tell you, I just got a brand new Surface Book 3, but 15-inch screen. So it's pretty nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want bad. I'm not willing to bite the bullet on it, but I do want that bad. I covet your computer now.
Yeah. No, listen, I had a Surface Book running for a long time, and I was like, I got the Black Friday special. I'm like, all right, $300 off. All right, let's rock it. Let's do it. Isn't
that the BVoIP standard Surfaces?
Yes, except for Brian Free. He decided HP was for him. And then he tells me the other day that his battery is bulging and his battery's underneath of his like touchpad. And so like now there's a bulge in his touchpad. I was like, go back to the store and have him replace it, please.
But that explains a lot about Brian Free.
Yeah. I've got the Surface Book too, and I love it. I've definitely liked this machine.
Yeah. I mean, one thing's for sure, the built-in webcam and the built-in, the HD mic. I mean, when everybody was struggling finding webcams, I was like, nope, I'm good. It's right here. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people now are like literally using the camera on their phone is so good. Right?
I'll tell you what, man, this 12 takes some amazing pictures.
Have you gotten the thing, like, there's like the built-in magnet here, right? Where you can like connect it to like, have you seen that?
No, I haven't done, I know what you're talking about, but no, I have not done the little magnet thing. Plus I got a thing in the back of mine, a little strap to hold it with.
I'm still worried about a magnet being on my phone.
Well, they're already listening to everything you say. So what's the magnet gonna do?
Maybe I'm old school. No, I'm just talking about having a magnet. Your electronics.
Your electronics. Rub it across the hard drive.
Remember, I started out in the electronics world with degaussing and using magnets to destroy stuff. So
I mean, you don't have a spinning disc in your phone. I mean, is it going to really pull out the flash memory card? I mean, or whatever it is they're using now?
Old color TVs didn't have a spinning disc either. You ever see what a magnet does to those?
No. Should I Google it?
Yeah. Look up degaussing old TVs. You'll see. And actually, that's how I used to fix a TV. If you pulled it to the right place and pulled it away, it got your picture centered again. It was all about magnetism back in the day.
Yeah, I wonder how
you're talking about black and white TVs, right?
No, not black and no degaussing there, no color.
Yeah, very interesting. So, Paul, I mean, kind of wrapping up the thought on what we were talking earlier in the call, with all these different remote technologies and file sharing technologies, and there's just so many apps out there, man. I mean, people are just downloading whatever. I mean, I was talking to somebody who's in a medical field a couple weeks ago, and they're like, yeah, this other practice was used. It's like whisper down the rain. Oh, you're using that? Oh, let's try it over here. Like, how do people know, other than just, hey, I'm just going to do what everybody else does? How do people know if they're in a safe place when it comes to things that won't get them in trouble?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on it earlier. Everything starts with a business associate agreement, right? If they won't sign it, there's a reason. You don't try to like conform the vendor to the compliance, right? So you find this nifty utility, you would love to use it in your medical practice or your MSP that's heavy in medical. You send them a BAA, they reject it. You got to go find another utility, right? And so for the record, you're required to do vendor due diligence. So it doesn't mean that Microsoft is going to fill out your spreadsheet, right? But for a smaller software, for somebody that doesn't have a track record that you really don't know anything about, there's a questionnaire that you're really obligated to send out. For example, at Compliancy Group, if we sign up for a phone service, that phone vendor's got to get, they got to get a survey from us that asks what they're doing with our stuff, because we've got to be HIPAA compliant, right? That thing should happen everywhere. You can't take people at their word. There's a contract that answers that question. It's either signed or it's not.
And then what happens, this is always a good one, what happens when you want to give them your version of the BAA and they want to give you their version of the BAA, and then there's competing BAAs?
So the way it is supposed to work is covered entity, meaning the doctor, whoever originates the PHI, to their vendor, and then on upstream. So I'll take BVoIP as an easy example, right? One of your MSPs is out there, they're working with a medical group. The medical group is obligated to give that MSP their BAA. Now, if they don't, the MSP is not legally obligated necessarily to, but it's smart to give them yours. Hey, look, here's mine. We're going to go ahead and put this in place because you're not doing what you're supposed to. And by the way, that means that's a good opportunity for you to bring us in and let us try to educate these people on what they're doing wrong. But where you're really obligated, where you're really worried as an MSP, is that when you send somebody data, you've got to make sure that BAA gets filed, right? So back to big versus small. If I'm a Datto customer, then I'm going to have to use Datto's BAA, Microsoft's BAA, right? These larger corporations. If I hired that MSP, I hired this small organization over here, I'm going to give them mine. So as long as there's two things that have to happen. It's got to be in place and it's got to be enforceable. And guys, everybody out there, I'll tell you right now, a BAA is not enforceable if either party asks the other one to accept their liability. I cannot take liability for your breach and you cannot take liability for mine. It doesn't matter that you're the MSP. If my employee screwed up, it is my fault. If your employee screwed up, it is your fault. And a well-written BAA clearly states that. You wouldn't believe how many times I have partners bring us this thing that somebody handed them. And it says, no matter what happens in my organization, you are responsible for my HIPAA compliance. That's not a business associate agreement. It's not something you can sign.
And how long, like a tax exemption form, do you have to re-up your BAA every so often? Like, how long is it good for?
Technically speaking, a BAA is one of those that you don't have to have an annual review or anything you don't have to renew it. You have to review the vendors that you're required to have,
right?
And you need to make sure that you've got it on file, but it doesn't have to change. So if BVoIP signs my BAA, I put it in my system. It's there every year. I just got to, when I do my risk assessment, we go, still using BVoIP? Yep. Still got the BAA? Yep. Good.
Okay. And then is there, I know they do this with like, I know this is one of Matt Lee's favorite, the SSO tax website, right? Where they track everyone who charges for that. But is there, any centralized repository of people who are good versus not, like approved versus not? I mean, I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
There's a very easy way to find people that screw up. It's called the HIPAA wall of shame. You can Google the HIPAA wall of shame or the OCR, Office of Civil Rights wall of shame. It's a searchable database of mostly good people that bad things happen to. If you have a breach, you have an audit, you have a fine, or you have a failure, your business name, your personal name as the owner, the date, the incident, all that information becomes public record, and it's public record forever.
Can I make a note on that, Paul? Make sure you search HIPAA wall of shame. If you search wall of shame, you're going to get stuff that may not pertain to what you're looking for.
Yes, that's a good call. It is the HIPAA wall of shame. And I'll go back to something Ken so graciously pointed out earlier. You won't find any of my customers on it.
That's good. Any last advice or recommendations to anyone out there who is trying to figure out what they're going to do for 2021? I mean, is there any planning that they should be doing? Is there anything that you've seen other people get into trouble to that are just obvious things that they should do? Just open mic. You tell the world what you think.
I'll tell you what I think I learned this year, and it was a lesson that came in a lot of different forms. At Compliancy Group, we, like a lot of the other vendors in the channel, spend a lot of time on the road at these large conferences. Our marketing has been focused on exposing our brand and getting sales in place. And so you chase leads a specific way, right? 2020 was the year of education. The whole approach that you have to have when trying to drive business, when trying to work with new customers, now you've got to switch over to an educational mind frame. What I learned talking to all those MSPs out there, I'm like, what are you doing to engage with your customers right now? I'm talking to them about their business. I'm teaching them, and the answer always began with, I'm talking to or I'm teaching. It was never, I built a new sales presentation. It's like 12 new slides and it explains my products better and I've got new sales moving, right? I think in 2020 and beyond, we now as a society expect our vendors and the businesses that support us to talk to us and expose to us things that they see that we're falling down on, other options that we might not have considered. And if you're an MSP or a service provider out there, and you can do that, you can go in and spend part of your QBR, for example, teaching them something that they don't know, talking to them about what's happening in the market, and not simply going back down that checklist of, there's this thing that came out, we need to go ahead and get this application in place for you. The sales will come. People were, I want to say, hungry, not just for knowledge, but genuine human interaction. And you talk about something that's not going away. We will never forget 18 months of isolation or however long this thing goes down. We'll never forget this.
So let me add my piece of advice since we're on the call with Paul. If you have any dealings with HIPAA or compliance, my advice is, instead of calling Saul, you better call Paul.
That's right. That's right.
Honestly, I learned so much. Like I said, that's no joke. When you think about the stuff, first of all, the number of audits that are required, I used to think, I got the audit, I got that audit done. And then Paul comes along and tells me there's 6 of them and I almost have a heart attack, right? It's like crazy to think about. So if you have any involvement, any requirements, you should be reaching out to Compliancy Group and talking about that, because that to me is the most important thing. If you get subject to one of these audits, it's over.
Yep. $1.5 million average fine.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Well, everyone, look for Paul on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and at compliancygroup.com. Ken Patterson. If you don't know where to find Ken, you're just not looking. And he's everywhere. Just type in Ken Patterson and the internet will give him to you. And please follow us again, Tuesdays and Thursdays, MSP Initiative Live. All of these sessions are recorded. So this one you can play back, rewind, fast forward on mspinitiative.com. And we got a lot of good stuff that we're going to get to for the end of the year. And frankly, I'm looking forward to next year. Not because I think everything's just going to magically go away. I just think that there's a lot of good things in place. And I think that there's, smart people doing smart things because, ebb and flow, change is the constant, right?
And possibly more tours.
Maybe,
Ooh.
maybe
Mm.
more tours
You
coming
know,
to
Ken, that's not the worst idea you ever had. We should think about that.
Aye. All right, guys. I will catch you all on the flip. See you again around the corner. Everyone else, see you back on Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Bye.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye, guys.
You got it.